you ignored the scoreboard and all you did was look at possession and field position, then the Dragons should have beaten Cronulla on Thursday night. They had 51% of possession and had 54% of the territory. They also conceded fewer penalties and were awarded the only set restart of the match. But the Dragons were very much like that cricket team with all the gear and no idea. So possession and territory have long been used to measure team success, and those stats have been pretty basic ever since they were introduced, and they really only tell part of the story. It's really about what a team does with that possession and that territory, and you can also throw in completion rates to that. The Roosters completed at the worst rate in the competition last year, but they still finished quite comfortably in the top 8 and very nearly finished in the top 4. See, the Dragons, they don't do much with the ball once they've got possession or very good territory. They had 28 tackles inside Cronulla's 20-metre zone, so the red zone, where you're supposed to be scoring all your points. Cronulla, they only had 17 tackles inside that red zone. Cronulla scored 4 tries from their chances, and St George, well, they managed 2, and one of those after the game was long gone and they were playing against an 11-man defensive line. So it took the Dragons 13 tackles in that red zone for them to actually get on the scoreboard. But Cronulla averaged a try every 3 tackles when they entered the 20-metre area. And it was a similar story for St George back in round 2. They had 54% of possession against Penrith. They ran for more metres than Penrith, but they still lost 20 points to 16. Their defence was at least better in that second half, and it got close towards the end. And yes, I get it, sin bins play a role in the game, and Jaden Silver being binned against Penrith was harsh, but his sin binning against Cronulla was anything but harsh. And it really doesn't fix a trend that we're actually seeing from a lot of the lower placed teams. Let's take the Bulldogs, for example. In round 2, they had 59% of possession. They threw 20 offloads to Brisbane's 4, and they ran for 600 more metres than Brisbane. The stats, if you just take them and ignore the scoreboard, they say that the Bulldogs won. But in truth, obviously, the scoreboard said otherwise. So I'm just going to take you to Mike Meiklewood's article from last week, where he had a chat about that Dogs match and asked Trent Barrett about what had happened out there on the field. Now, Barrett didn't really seem to understand what Meiklewood was getting at, because Barrett said, we had 8 chances or something to try and score some points, which is kind of true. You had plenty of chances to score points, and we don't really have a way to measure how good those chances were. Was there a pass dropped with the line wide open, or did you simply not do much and you just were kind of camped in that area? You went sideline to sideline. Maybe you bashed it up the middle a couple of times to try and compress the defensive line, but really you didn't actually threaten to do anything. And while we're without that stat, it's hard to really say what happened. However, what Meiklewood was getting at is, well, did you really actually have those chances to score points like Barrett said? Or was it simply just a case of, my team was down there for a long time, so therefore I believe they had chances to score? Something that has tried to deal with this, though, is the Rugby League eye tests with his expected points stat. Now, unfortunately, that's kind of come to a halt after the first 2 rounds due to his stats provider no longer providing the data we need to produce it. What that was actually bearing out is teams' likelihood to score points from certain areas on the field. And there's a more detailed description of what that actually is. I'll put that in the description. That's a link to his website. But going back to the Dragons, and if you look at their expected points tally, they managed to score 15 points more than the average last year. So pretty good, although only 2 teams scored below average. So, St George, they were above average, but nowhere near the really, really good sides who were, 30, 40, 50, 60. I think Melbourne were well over 90% expected points. But their defence, St George's defence, is what really let them down last year, because they conceded 29% more points on average. So I can't really tell you how they fixed that problem. That's an issue they're going to have to solve themselves, because rugby league isn't great when it comes to dealing with in-depth statistics and statistical breakdowns. We don't have a Cricinfo or a Wisden Almanac that we can go back decades and decades and decades and look at all the statistics from years gone by and be able to compare them to now, or look at historical trends. Jack Gibson was probably the first coach to apply things like tackle counts, and that was in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, and none of that was published, really. None of that was publicised. Even the stats that I can get off NRL.com, they only go back to 2004 if the player was playing back then. I can't really go back any more than to 2013 on their fully publicly available statistics. So we're kind of left with these stats, these questions, and not many answers. So let's take a bit of a look at what the Dragons have been dealing with lately. So if we go over to the 5th minute of the game, Dragons get a penalty, so they get to halfway. They spend the first couple of tackles kind of just getting through their work, and they take some pretty standard hit-ups. So they've burnt the first 3 tackles. They haven't really threatened anything to Cronulla. So in tackle 4, they then go to their left edge. And here, Ben Hunt runs pretty simple line and then passes the ball out to Tyrell Sloan, who's the fullback here. There's not a lot going on here, and there's not a lot for Cronulla to deal with. They're pretty comfortable in a defensive setup. So when you see Sloan get the ball, he's just got a basic 3-on-3, and no one from Cronulla has been inconvenienced by anything that's transpired before Sloan's got the ball. The decoy run from Jack Bird's pretty impotent and doesn't attract anyone, so you can see Britt Nakora pushing across hard from the inside, so even if Sloan was to step off his left foot and try and exploit a tired forward, there isn't one. And right in front of him is Nicho Hynes, who's coming up and at him. So he's cutting down his time and his ability to ball play. And the outside runners as well, I mean, they're about where you'd expect them to be for any NRL side looking to spread to their left edge. But as I said, they haven't done any lead-up work to really stretch the Cronulla defence. And here, Sloan steps back on the inside, so he doesn't even pull the Cronulla team across all the way to their right sideline. Instead, he almost centres the ball again. So they've kept the entire set so far within almost those 20-metre tram tracks, just kind of keeping it almost in the middle, which doesn't really stress teams these days if you're not making huge meters through the middle. If those defenses aren't having to get back quickly and then get off their line quickly, if they're able to kind of saunter back, turn around, get set, come up, they're not under a lot of stress. You're not going to be able to exploit the A defenders and the B defenders or find tired markers that aren't getting square and either caught out by the ref or give away 6 again. So at the end of this play, he gets pretty easily contained by the Dragons. They burn another tackle, but it's actually a pretty good tackle that they burn here because Francis Molo just trucks through a bunch of Cronulla defenders and carries them for about 10 metres. So they actually get presented with a bit of a staggered Cronulla defensive line with a bit of room to move. And it is last tackle, but this is the end of the field where you can try something. Because if it doesn't come off, you're going to hand the ball over in the corner against Cronulla and they've got to then work it off their own line. But instead of actually trying something and really trying to open up Cronulla's defence, putting them under pressure, Hunt gets the ball and then he goes immediately to Amon, who puts in this kind of pathetic grubber that gets easily cleaned up by Matt Moylan, who, by the way, isn't playing fullback, he's playing 5'8". So it's a problem when the guy playing 5'8" is being able to drop out of the defensive line and easily clean up your grubber that barely goes 5 metres beyond where you kicked it. And really, it's a chance that goes begging because as we can see here, Matt Ikuvalu for Cronulla, which is their left side winger, he's back expecting a kick or a bomb to come across. So there's room on the Dragons' right edge. If they were willing to, they could have spread the ball and see what happens. Zach Lomax is a fantastic centre who quite often stands his opposite number up. They could have given him easy early ball against Connor Tracy. And whilst Tracy often plays above his weight and plays above his size, you still want to give Lomax the ball and give him the chance to do something, particularly with the right winger they've got in Michaeli Ravalawa. You've got 2 big bodies there who are going to beat their guy one-on-one most of the time, so why not give them the ball and see what they can do? Instead, the grubber that goes through does nothing, and you might as well have just handed the ball over to Cronulla at the end of the set. Now, as I said, this is the area of the field where kind of a meekish handover isn't the end of the world because they've still got to work it off their own line. However, this is early in the match. Both sides are 13 on 13 at this stage, and you should really be trying to stress the opponents and making them do something. And throughout that entire set, Cronulla never looked flustered. They never looked under any sort of defensive pressure, and they easily cleaned the ball up and set up for the next set. The simplest thing the Dragons could have done at the end of here is, instead of Hunt passing it, simply just put a bomb up where Ikuvalu has to stand in his corner and wait for Ravalawa to challenge him for it. You might score a touch off Ikuvalu and get 6 again. It might bounce off him and go out. Ravalawa could come up with the ball and score for you, but then there's a 50-50 chance of something happening. The grubber that goes through no one's really aware of it, that it's going to go through, so no one chases it. And as I said, Cronulla cleaned it up pretty easily. The better teams don't do this. The better teams look to try and exploit numbers when they see them, or they try and at least make it a contest for the ball where there's a chance that something weird could happen. I'm not going to go too deep into this because I'll have another video coming up about this, but Parramatta do this pretty well with their crossfield kicks in that they always look for a contest for the ball. They're not one of the sides that kind of put a kick up and then just try and corral someone in the corner. They almost always contest the kick, and as we saw against Melbourne, that comes off quite often if the kick's good and if your players are aware it's coming through. This play should really tell you everything you need to know about the Dragons. It's almost like they're just going through the motions. Like, I've got the ball, I've got to pass it, okay, it's last tackle, I've got to kick it, I'm going to kick it this way. And there's not a lot that's gelling them together here. And really, that's just the Dragons at the moment. And I could throw some footy buzzwords at you about them really needing to gel, as I kind of just mentioned, or they'll kind of sort their issues out. But how that actually occurs and whether or not that happens, we don't know. Or we could just go with the fact, and with what the stats have told us over the past couple of years, is that St George are a below average side kind of playing to that level of ability at the moment. And they're really going to need to step things up if they're going to be anywhere near the top 8 come August, when they really need to try and secure a finals berth. Otherwise, we could see Anthony Griffin under some pressure there. If you like this video or you want to see more of this type of content, please like and subscribe. Drop me a comment in the comment section if you want to know something or find out something from a game on the weekend. Don't forget, I'm also here on Wednesday this week. As I said, I'm looking at the half crossfield bomb is what I've termed it. So this is when teams put the crossfield bomb, but they're not targeting the winger, they're targeting the opponent's halfback or 5/8, and we'll see what actually happens there. So until Wednesday, I'll catch you then. Bye for now.